Jonas had always thought first impressions were overrated, but standing in the middle of Virelia's main plaza, surrounded by hovering vendors and glimmering crystal towers, he was beginning to reconsider. The air hummed with the low vibration of anti-gravity vehicles zipping past, and a faint scent of ozone mixed with sweet, alien spices curled into his nose, making him wonder if he'd accidentally wandered into a culinary lab experiment. He tried to adjust the strap of his satchel, only to knock over a small hovering cart carrying shimmering fruit spheres, which ricocheted like metallic billiard balls across the plaza. One landed squarely in his face, and when he peeled it off, it oozed a strange, luminous juice down his shirt. Jonas cursed quietly, half in English, half in something he hoped was Virelian, while a nearby vendor gave him the slow blink of mild judgment, which on Virelia could mean anything from "you're pathetic" to "please don't explode anything else today." That was when he saw her. Leora. She wasn't just walking through the crowd. She seemed to glide, her long ears tilting with every subtle shift of the breeze, catching the light so that they flickered like living jewelry. She looked human enough, tall, graceful, eyes sharp as knives. But the elegance in her posture, the impossible length of her ears, and the way she casually ignored a small whirlwind of hovering fruit smashing around her made her something else entirely. Jonas's heart tripped over itself. Here was the woman everyone had whispered about for centuries, the one who rejected every suitor, who had been the subject of exaggerated tales in human research journals and alien gossip alike. Jonas attempted to straighten his shirt, which was now a rainbow of fruit juice, and decided on diplomacy. "Excuse me," he said, his voice wobbling. I seem to have accidentally," he gestured vaguely at the bouncing fruit, "initiated a minor fruit incident." Leora's eyes flicked down at him, then back up, and he swore her long ears twitched like antennae catching signals he couldn't hope to decode. For a moment he thought she might turn and vanish into the crowd, leaving him a sticky, humiliated heap, but instead she arched an eyebrow, or whatever the Virelian equivalent of an eyebrow was, and let out a sound that Jonas could only interpret as a laugh, though it was refined, musical, and slightly dangerous. He grinned awkwardly. "I meant to do that," he said. "Performance art, very cutting edge back on Earth. People pay to see humans get hit by fruit." She tilted her head, one ear flicking to the side as if analyzing him, and Jonas realized he might actually be holding her attention, which felt like catching lightning in a jar. He tried another joke. "Or maybe I'm auditioning for Interstellar slapstick. I hear it's all the rage on Gliese." Gee, he had no idea if that planet had comedy clubs. He was hoping she didn't notice. Leora's laughter rose, soft and musical, echoing across the plaza and making nearby humans and aliens alike glance at the improbable spectacle. Jonas's confidence grew dangerously. "I can show you more tricks," he said, holding up his hands like a magician about to reveal the secrets of the universe. "I have a whole repertoire. Step on a laser grid, get zapped, bounce into a hover cart, classic stuff." She stepped closer, ears flaring in amusement, and Jonas noticed the faint shimmer along the edges of her skin where sunlight hit at a certain angle. He had read about Virelians having subtle bioluminescence, but seeing it in person made it feel alive, as if the light itself recognized her existence. "You're persistent," she said, her voice lilting, a mix of curiosity and mild reproach. "I prefer to call it committed," Jonas replied. "Some might say stubborn, others tragically heroic. You know, depends on who's writing the Interstellar journals." Leora's eyes narrowed slightly, though the corners twitched in amusement. She didn't respond, just gestured vaguely to a floating fountain nearby. Jonas, thinking he was invited to follow, stepped carefully, only to slip on a stray puddle of the fruit juice he had left behind. He flailed, arms windmilling, and landed with a splash right in the fountain. A group of hovering vendors blinked slowly at him, then returned to their business as if this was just another Virelian afternoon. "You're remarkably clumsy," Leora said, and Jonas swore her ears quivered with laughter. "I like to think of it as making an unforgettable impression," he said, spitting out a small rainbow of liquid. "Guaranteed to be remembered. Some might call it the human touch, or maybe the human disaster." Her amusement softened, and she extended one long, delicate hand, which Jonas stared at like a man lost at sea. "You are unlike any human I have encountered," she said. "Most run away after the first mistake, or the second, or after getting drenched in bioluminescent fruit juice." "I find persistence charming," Jonas said, using a line he'd been rehearsing in the mirror since Earth morning, though it sounded terrible in practice. I mean, unless it's mildly insane, but mostly charming. Her ears twitched once, twice, and then she nodded. Just a small, almost imperceptible motion, but to Jonas it felt seismic. He could feel the shift, the tiny crack in centuries of self-imposed isolation. The first step, he realized, was done. He had her attention. She hadn't fled. She hadn't scoffed. And in a world filled with hovering dangers, interstellar etiquette, and alien skepticism, that was a victory worth celebrating. Jonas climbed out of the fountain, dripping, sticky, and grinning like a fool. Leora's laughter followed him, and somewhere deep in his chest, he felt the beginning of something improbable, something that might just bridge worlds. And if nothing else, he thought, at least he'd finally discovered why everyone said the alien woman with long ears was impossible to impress. It wasn't because she was unkind or unfeeling. It was because she had waited for someone who could survive fruit, fountains, and bad jokes all at once. And Jonas was very, very determined to be that someone. Jonas woke to the soft hum of Virelia's triple suns rising over the city, the light bouncing off crystalline towers, and making the entire plaza look like a kaleidoscope in motion. His head throbbed faintly, a reminder that yesterday's fountain incident was not a dream, and the sticky remnants of bioluminescent fruit juice still clung stubbornly to his shirt. He groaned, rolled over, and realized he was late for his first attempt at bonding with Leora since the infamous fountain fiasco. He grabbed his bag, which contained notebooks, a translator device, and an assortment of items he considered charming human gifts, mostly candy that looked suspiciously like tiny neon globes. Leora was already waiting in the floating gardens, hovering slightly above the walkways with a posture that made Jonas question gravity itself. Her long ears twitched in a pattern he suspected was some form of amusement or subtle judgment. "You're late," she said, voice lilting, playful, though tinged with that alien sharpness that reminded Jonas he was still very much an outsider. "I prefer to think of it as fashionably delayed," Jonas replied, bowing in an exaggerated human gesture. He nearly tripped over his own feet. Leora's ears twitched again, and he decided that this was promising. They moved through the gardens, where plants floated in midair, their roots weaving like translucent ribbons and occasionally brushing Jonas's arm with a light tickle. He jumped once, yelping, and Leora laughed, the sound drifting over the city below like liquid silver. "You humans are fragile," she said. "I like to think of it as sensitive," Jonas corrected, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "We're delicate creatures with emotional depth, or maybe just weak bones." Leora tilted her head, and for a moment, Jonas wondered if she was analyzing him for weaknesses or secretly plotting which part of his anatomy would be least useful in a duel. Then she gestured toward a floating platform lined with glowing alien flowers. "Show me something of your world," she said. Jonas blinked, momentarily panicked. "Of my world." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small globe of swirling blue and green, which wobbled unnaturally like it had a mind of its own. "This," he said proudly, "is Earth. A planet of chaos, bad traffic, and occasional genius. Also pizza." Leora leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly, examining the globe. "Traffic?" she asked, one ear twitching. "Why would sentient beings allow such disorder to persist?" "They don't," Jonas said, "mostly. But then some people really enjoy complaining about it. It's a cultural pastime, very sophisticated." Her laugh echoed again, and Jonas realized he was dangerously close to winning points. Emboldened, he pulled out a small device, one that translated emotions into color patterns projected above it. He pressed a button, and his nervous excitement exploded in a swirling cloud of pinks, oranges, and baffling electric green. The machine sputtered, buzzed, and then shot a small arc of light that set one of the floating flowers glowing in a shocking neon purple. Jonas yelped. Leora's ears flicked, one twitching violently as she fought to contain her laughter. "You are remarkable," she said, voice a mixture of amusement and incredulity. "Most humans would have destroyed themselves and half the garden by now." "I prefer the term environmentally interactive," Jonas said, attempting a bow that nearly sent him off the edge of the platform. Leora extended a hand, steadying him with a grace that made her seem simultaneously light and immovable. Their fingers brushed, and Jonas felt the faintest static charge pass between them. His heart stuttered. They spent hours walking through the floating gardens, talking about absurd things and serious ones, often simultaneously. Jonas told her about Earth's ridiculous inventions, self-stirring mugs, umbrellas that recorded your location, and she explained the Virelian concept of mood flora. plants that reflected the emotional state of their environment. One particularly bold flower shimmered red when Jonas tripped over nothing, turning purple when he told a joke about a two-headed dog he'd read about in an old Earth myth. Leora laughed more than Jonas thought possible, ears flaring like sails in the wind. Eventually, they came to a small observatory platform. Jonas set up a simple telescope, though he struggled with the zero-gravity adjustments. He peered into the sky and discovered Virelia's moons, spinning in silent, hypnotic orbits, and tried to explain how humans named moons after mythological creatures. "One's called Titan," he said, pointing. "Not the strongest moon, but the coolest name. You humans name everything for stories," Leora said, tilting her head. Her ears flicked forward, catching sunlight in a way that made Jonas dizzy. "Stories create meaning." "Yes," Jonas said earnestly. "Stories are our way of making the universe care about us. Mostly they fail, but we keep trying anyway." They talked late into the alien evening, and Jonas discovered that Leora's curiosity was as vast as her reputation suggested. She asked about laughter, sadness, friendship, and why humans found clumsiness endearing. Jonas answered with anecdotes, bad jokes, and improvised metaphors, all while carefully avoiding additional fountain incidents. Each moment of connection seemed to build something delicate and improbable between them: trust, amusement, understanding. As the last rays of the triple suns faded and the floating gardens shimmered with bioluminescent light, Jonas realized that something had shifted. Leora had invited him into spaces she usually kept private, shared stories she had never told anyone else, and laughed at things no one else could make her laugh at. He felt the first real sense of progress. She was beginning to trust him. And despite the absurdity of falling into fountains, electro-bursting emotion devices, and the occasional floating flower slap, Jonas knew that persistence, sincerity, and a willingness to look foolish might just be enough to bridge the gap between worlds. Leora's long ears twitched once more as she watched him stumble while attempting to untangle a stray cable from the telescope. "Remarkably persistent," she said softly. Jonas grinned, nearly toppling over again. She laughed, and in that sound he found a quiet promise. The next step, however unpredictable or ridiculous, might finally bring them closer than either of them expected. Jonas stared at the small device he had built over the past week. Wires looping every which way, blinking lights in dizzying patterns, and a single speaker that occasionally squeaked like a frightened rodent. He was exhausted, sticky with alien sap from the floating gardens, plants he had borrowed for calibration, and still nursing a bruised ego from the countless failed attempts to impress Leora without setting something on fire. But today, he told himself, was different. Today, he would show her not just persistence, but understanding, not just humor, but sincerity. He glanced at the observatory platform, where Leora was already hovering, her long ears catching the soft glow of Virelia's twin moons in a way that made them shimmer like fine silver threads. "You brought that thing?" she asked, voice a mixture of curiosity and suppressed amusement. "I did," Jonas said proudly, holding up the contraption with both hands. "It translates emotions into light patterns. I call it the heart spectrum." She tilted her head, ears twitching. "You intend to show me your emotions through blinking lights?" "Yes," Jonas said, grinning. "It's very subtle. Some might even call it dangerously avant-garde. Or just slightly ridiculous." Leora's laughter rang out, high and musical, and Jonas felt a surge of confidence. "If it's ridiculous, I promise the effect is intentional," he added. He turned the device on, and a soft glow began, shifting from blue to green to a hopeful pink as he concentrated on his feelings for her. The lights flickered and sputtered, then shot out a small arc of electricity that danced along the floating railing. Jonas yelped and jumped back, tripping over a stray cable, but managed to land on his feet, mostly. Leora's ears twitched violently, and she laughed so hard he thought the floating moons might shake in amusement. "You humans are truly chaotic," she said. "I do not know whether to be impressed or horrified." "Both," Jonas replied, pointing at himself. "It's a package deal." She shook her head, a rare soft smile touching her lips. "You are unlike any human I have encountered. Most would have given up long ago. Others never know when to stop being ridiculous." Jonas took a deep breath, heart hammering. "I don't know if I'll ever be perfect," he said, voice trembling slightly. "But I want to be honest. That's why I've come this far, not to impress you with gadgets or jokes, but to show that I mean what I feel." For a long moment, Leora said nothing. The floating moons glimmered, The lights from his heart spectrum device shimmered and blinked erratically, and the city below pulsed like a quiet heartbeat. Then slowly, deliberately, she reached out her hand. Jonas froze, staring at it like it was the most extraordinary thing in the universe. When their fingers met, there was a soft spark, a tiny, unintentional jolt of energy that left them both laughing nervously. "I have waited," Leora said, her voice low, carrying the weight of centuries, "for someone who can endure foolishness, persistence, and sincerity all at once." Jonas grinned despite the quivering in his chest. "I can endure all that. Plus, I've got excellent fruit-dodging skills." Her laughter returned, ears flaring proudly, and this time he felt it more than heard it, as though the sound itself was weaving a bond between them. "Then," she said, "we shall see if this bond is worthy." They spent the night in the observatory, sharing stories of distant planets, human absurdities, and the peculiarities of Virelian society. Leora revealed secrets of the floating gardens, confiding in him the names of plants that responded to moods and the hidden patterns in the crystal towers that aligned with planetary orbits. Jonas, in turn, admitted small human failings, like crying during old Earth comedies or getting lost in his own apartment building. And Leora's laughter carried warmth and acceptance, not mockery. By the time the triple suns rose again, Jonas realized that the fear and hesitation that had weighed on him for weeks were gone. He had not only earned her trust, but had also discovered something fundamental about himself. The courage to be persistent, the humility to be imperfect, and the joy of sharing one's world openly, no matter how alien the other might find it. "Do you truly accept this bond?" Jonas asked softly, feeling the weight of the moment press on his chest, mingled with hope and terror. "Yes," Leora said, her long ears fluttering gently, "not because you are flawless, but because you are unflinchingly sincere. Because you persist, laugh at failure, and still care." Jonas's chest felt impossibly light. "Then," he said, unable to resist a small grin, "I promise to keep being ridiculous, persistent, and sincere, possibly in equal measure." She laughed again, and this time it wasn't just amusement. It was a sound that carried trust, curiosity, and the first shimmer of something deeper. "You have grown, Jonas, and I have decided to grow with you." For the first time in centuries, Leora's reputation as the alien woman who rejected every suitor did not hold. Jonas had not only broken through the centuries of guarded isolation, but had found joy in the very act of trying. And in that act, he had changed too. He no longer worried about mistakes or ridicule. He understood that connection, sincerity, and laughter could bridge worlds, even between a clumsy human and a centuries-old alien of striking elegance. They stood together, hand in hand, looking out over Virelia's gleaming towers and floating gardens, the lights of the heart spectrum still flickering softly, now synchronized with their pulse. Jonas felt an unfamiliar, exhilarating calm. The universe had not conspired against him. It had simply waited for someone willing to stumble spectacularly, laugh wholeheartedly, and care enough to keep trying. And for the first time, Jonas knew that across galaxies, persistence, honesty, and humor were more powerful than any technology, any protocol, any expectation. They were enough. Leora leaned slightly, resting her head near his shoulder, ears twitching once in contentment, and Jonas allowed himself to smile fully, a smile that had endured fruit, fountains, floating plants, and failed gadgets. Together, they were something improbable, something enduring, and as the suns rose over Virelia, he felt the quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of a shared story that neither galaxy could have predicted, but one that at last was theirs.